Welcome to Bloodbath & Beyond. Today I'm taking a look at Jakob's wife, She Will Prey on You. Directed by the director of Girl on the Third Floor, Travis Stevens, starring Barbara Crampton, Larry Fessenden, and Bonnie Aarons as the Master. This movie is about Anne, played by Barbara Crampton, who's married to a small-town minister. As she's gotten older, she feels like her life is slipping away. She doesn't really enjoy her time with her husband, and after meeting the Master, which is a master vampire, it gives her a new sense of power and an appetite to live a little bit bolder. However, the change comes with a heavy price.
That's odd. You've got new teeth coming in.
First and foremost, it should be no surprise that Barbara Crampton absolutely steals the show. And so does Larry Fessenden. The pair of them as this older couple that just aren't clicking anymore, and they're at that age where it's hard to start anew, you know? So it's really cool to see their dynamic, and the way that their interactions are excellent. Anne's just in a really bad place, and Jakob's so in his own head that he doesn't even realize that his wife is not interested in their relationship at all. So it's a little bit more of a serious take on this vampire movie that you might expect from the trailer, and it's not always a bad thing, but I'll get to my dislikes later on and we'll discuss some of the issues that we have. But the acting across the board is excellent.
Oh, good, you're home. Get changed. I'd like to go out.
We also had a nice surprise from CM Punk as Deputy Colton, which was kind of fun. And Bonnie Aarons just owns being this master vampire. She looks the part, she acts the part. It's pretty great. A big highlight of this film is the gore as well.
How much of that could I get?
You want the blood?
They didn't shy away from just blood spraying all over the place. One of the first gags, I guess, Anne has just picked up a bunch of bags of blood from the grocery store. She's sipping on blood like it's wine. She's dancing with a lamp and then just starts puking blood. And there's lots of bloodshed as well when it comes to kills. I think the most notable one's actually in the trailer where a guy is coming to check on her. She does like a half decapitation and then drinks the blood out of his neck like a fountain. It's wonderful. And there are a lot of other kills like that throughout the film. Closer to the back half though. The overall production value, especially being an indie film, is fantastic, and it's a fairly light-hearted movie despite what the initial synopsis might suggest. Like with them having their troubles as a couple, it is still fairly fun.
It wasn't me.
Of course it was you!
But that being said, there's a really weird tone to this movie because you have such serious content here, and then when you have Anne as a vampire doing her thing, there's a lot of like comedic moments, but it's not an over-the-top comedy in those aspects. It's just like really subtle, even though there's blood spraying everywhere. It's a really weird mix. I personally didn't enjoy the tone of this movie. Despite like some of the clips that I'm showing and some things that you'll see in the trailer, there's a lot of blood in certain aspects, but for the most part, it's really dull.
Why didn't you tell me when this first happened?
I felt ashamed.
As you should.
The people that die don't seem to even matter, so you're not attached to anyone. It's just like, oh, okay, there's another person who died, that's it. And you just move on to the next person without even caring. But the main issue is definitely the switch in tone, or the fact that they're trying to bridge like a comedy movie with a very serious aspect. I didn't think it really worked personally. I've seen people praise this movie and think it's great and it's got the perfect amount of comedy, but I was really bored for a lot of it. Like I said, I did like the acting and everything, but like it seems like it was marketed, or even like the reviews suggest that it's supposed to be much more funny and upbeat than it actually is.
That looks heavy.
Overall, it's not a bad movie, but it's not something that's like a hard recommend for me. I think a lot of people will find enjoyment because of the acting and the scenario, and especially like the unique take on Anne just being Jakob's wife and not really being herself. Of course, until she becomes a vampire. I think that whole dynamic and the idea is really great, and in certain instances, I did really have a lot of fun, especially when Anne is just figuring out what she needs to do and how to navigate being a vampire. Larry Fessenden, Jakob himself, did an excellent job, and there are some pretty great practical effects. However, the general tone of this movie is just, well, I can appreciate the filmmaking aspects and everything that went into it, and I can understand why it would win certain awards at film festivals and such. I just didn't have a great time, but I would still recommend checking it out. It is also worth mentioning that I don't often like vampire movies in general, so you can take this with a grain of salt, but regardless, I'm gonna give this 3 steaks out of 5. And just before we go, I do want to mention the Blu-ray. It's from RLJE. It's got a nice little slip. It's pretty velvety. I like it. and it's just the Blu-ray. There's no double disc here. One of my big dislikes was the fact that the people that died, you didn't really know. And it's because all of the deleted scenes which this comes with, every one is all of those side stories. There's so much more to the characters that are never seen. You'll see Anne having like a passing conversation with one person here before they die, and that's it. But in the deleted scenes, you can see that they explore some of these characters like way more in depth, and I really wish they kept them in. But at the same time, I was already complaining about the pacing. I don't really know, but it was missing something. I think the editing could have been tightened up to squeeze some of these in so that we actually cared about the people that were dying. And then there's also the making of Jakob's wife, which is the other special feature, which I was really excited for, especially having just watched the movie. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to see how they did some of these practical effects. Unfortunately, it's not a making of Jakob's wife. It's actually just a handful of the actors sitting there talking about the movie and how it came to be. Well, they do have some interesting stories. For example, Barbara Crampton really wanted to do this movie and get Larry to be her husband. They had worked on like We Are Still Here together, but in this they had like a little different chemistry. So it was cool to hear why people got on board for this project. Bonnie Aaron's talking about how she's always wanted to be a vampire, and most people already know her as the nun from the Conjuring universe, so it was interesting to hear her take on that. But there are no additional behind the scenes footage or anything, so it's not necessarily a making of. It's more like interviews with the cast, and those are the only two special features, unfortunately, on the Blu-ray. But to me, it's still a movie worth putting in the collection, just because it's two people that I really enjoy seeing on screen, and I would probably get Barbara Crampton to sign this at some point if I see her at a convention, because it is probably one of her strongest roles. So her and Larry did an awesome job, and that's why I want this, and I will revisit it in the future, but I just don't know if my mind will change, just simply because of the pacing and the tone. If you don't want to pick up the Blu-ray and you just want to watch it, it is hitting Shudder on August 19th. So make sure to check that out. If you're interested in picking up the Blu-ray, links are in the description. And if this is your first time here, make sure you subscribe to the channel, stay up to date with everything Bloodbath and beyond.